So Keith, thank you for joining us here at Ore Day and making the trip in town to talk about, of course, Orefinders resources. And for anybody who doesn't know, this is Keith Benn, Dr. Keith Benn. He's the Vice President of Exploration for Orefinders Resources. So welcome.
Good to see you this morning, Stephen.
So Keith, you're a PhD in structural geology.
Correct.
Structure is probably the most important thing in geology, so they tell me.
Well, you won't get any argument from me on that, that's for sure.
So tell our listeners what that means. Why is structure so important?
Well, in the case of Orefinders in Mustango River, it's especially important because we're looking for gold deposits in a Precambrian greenstone belt. They're generally orogenic style gold deposits, as we call them. What that means in simple terms is that they're gold deposits that form during large-scale tectonic deformation of Earth's crust. And the gold deposits themselves are formed along those structures that form in Earth's crust during those periods of tectonism. Hence, it follows that if you want to look for some of these deposits, you want somebody who understands structural geology, who can find these structures and locate deposits along them. We use lots of other disciplines, get involved as well, geochemistry, geophysics, but ultimately always to look for these structures.
So structure's where the gold's at.
That is where the gold is at. Not very far away anyway.
Good, okay. And so tell us about the structure in Kirkland Lake and maybe how that relates to how we're looking for it on our McGarry project and Murado project, and also the Shining Tree. And is it the same geology?
The principal structure in the Kirkland Lake camp and all the way from Virginiatown, really near the Quebec border, through Kirkland Lake and to Matachewan is the Larder Cadillac structure. It's a very large, complex fault zone that formed 2.7 billion years ago or so, and along which most of the gold deposits, certainly the world-class, the big gold deposits, are located. Some of them are hosted directly within that structure, like out near McGarry, and others are on smaller structures that are associated with that Larder Cadillac structure. Now, in terms of the Knight project, that structure is not present in the Knight properties, but there's another structure that runs south of it. The Knight property is actually between two major structures, the Larder Cadillac structure and another one to the south. And I think that's what makes the Knight project especially interesting from a from a gold exploration and structural geology standpoint. We're in a very complex zone there. So in general, we're exploring along that major fault structure, and also to the north of it in Kirkland Lake. That's where the big Kirkland Lake deposit is located, slightly to the north of that structure. In geology that we'll call a sedimentary basin, there are metasedimentary rocks there of the Temiskaming assemblage is what it's called, and other faults linked to the Larder Cadillac fault deform those rocks and deform cyanidic intrusive bodies in those rocks, and that's where the gold is found in the Kirkland Lake camp.
Okay. So you mentioned the Knight project, and the investors and Orefinders will know that's where we're drilling as we speak. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're roughly halfway through a 10,000 meter program, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have 2 holes, actually 1.5 holes left to drill on the Tiranite exploration target, for which we had slated just over 5,000 meters. So we're very close to finishing up there. We'll finish up there at about a week and a half. Then we'll be moving on to the Porphyry Lake area, which includes the Minto-type targets that people have probably heard about. And we'll be drilling 6 drill holes there, relatively shallow drill holes because our targets there are relatively shallow, which is a good thing. And then we'll be moving up to the Duggan West target zone to finish off. We'll get to Porphyry Lake in February, late January, early February. We'll spend 3.5 weeks there, and then we'll move on to Duggan and wrap up in late March.
Okay, so for those who follow the Knight project, the Knight project itself has multiple zones. So the Tiranite, which is a former producing mine, we've released 1 hole out of there so far, and we've got, I think, how many holes are we drilling again precisely on the Tiranite?
13.
13 holes, and we're almost done. And then once we're done that, we're moving over to the Porphyry Lake targets, which is just a little bit over to the west, I believe,
West and south.
And we've got some sort of a binary target there, which I consider is the Porphyry Lake target, which we've got some interesting geophysics. But what do you see there?
Well, to begin with, that target is on a newly recognized by us structural trend that runs from south of the Porphyry Lake target zone, north-northwest through the Duggan target zone and continues on. So the Duggan and Porphyry Lake target zones are situated on the same structural trend, which we've recently identified. The geophysics we've used at Porphyry Lake is an induced polarization, IP, which we inherited, a data set we inherited, but we commissioned that it be reprocessed and remodeled, and by Mira Geosciences out of Montreal, who did a really nice job. And we've identified four, I believe it's four shallow targets in the IP data set that we're going to drill, and then there are three, I believe, that we've whittled it down to three targets that we call Minto type. These are slightly different. They look like magmatic breccia types, which have been explored a bit in the past, have been shown to have good gold grades in them. So we're going to drill, I believe there's a total of 7 holes. Sorry if I'm not real precise on that one, because we've been working on refining our drilling program down there. That seems to be a type of mineralization associated with large porphyritic intrusive bodies, hence the name Porphyry Lake, I believe. And so we could have magmatic breccia pipes and also disseminated sulfides around those porphyritic intrusions. That's what we're looking for.
All right, and then afterwards, we're going to move up to the north, and we're going to drill these Dugan targets.
Yeah, that's right. Dugan is about 2,000 meters west of Tiranite. We're expecting to drill something very similar to Tiranite there. I say expecting because much of what we're going to drill is undercover, so to speak. There's Proterozoic sedimentary rocks deposited over top of much of that area. But we used a 3D model of a geophysical data set that we had done recently, same outfit that did the modeling, Mira out of Montreal. And basically we took a high resolution aeromagnetic data set that we had available. We had a 3D inversion model performed, and in that 3D inversion model, we were able to identify a structural setting very similar to Tiranite. I won't go into great detail on it here, but it looks very much like Tiranite. And so we've planned 4 relatively deep holes there to test that, to see whether we find a mineralized structure like the one at Tiranite.
Okay, so that's great. So Night Project's going to be wrapped up another couple months, and then we're going to drag the drill to one of our other projects.
Yes.
So what's next on the list of drill programs for Orefinders?
The next on the list should be the Murado project, okay, south of Kirkland Lake. That's a slightly different beast geologically from our other exploration programs. It looks like it is a gold-enriched part of a VMS, or volcanogenic massive sulfide system. That's not unknown in the Abitibi Greenstone Belt, by the way, at all. I don't want to compare it to any particular deposit because there are differences and there are similarities, but that's from our conceptual exploration point of view, it looks like it's a gold-enriched part of a VMS system, probably. That's very attractive to us for several reasons. One of the reasons is that there's a relatively recent resource of 400,000 ounces approximately, commissioned by Orefinders in 2013, inferred resource of roughly 400,000 ounces, much of it open pittable, shallow. So along strike from the known Murado deposit, there's been some, where the resource is located, there's been some very interesting trenching that was done subsequent to 2013 when the resource was done. And channel sampling in those trenches returned some very interesting assay results. There's not much I think no drilling, in fact, around those trenches. So we're going to probably focus our drilling there and see if we can add to that existing resource.
So that's the MZ zone, and that's really the western,
Yes.
what we consider the potential to be the western extension of,
Yes.
of that open pittable resource, which we
Yes.
call the south zone, I guess, really,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
so the idea is we're gonna put some holes out on the MZ zone to see if we can expand that existing open pit constrained resource.
Expand the existing open pit resource or establish another resource proximal to the first one. And there'd be great synergy there if we did. It's definitely worthy of drilling, and it could be low-hanging fruit. And so we're going to head over there straight away after finishing up at night.
And the targets are relatively well-defined and good to go?
They're relatively well-defined. The next time I'm in Kirkland Lake, which should be fairly soon, I'm going to sit down with a local geologist there who's worked on that project, who knows it very well. We're going to pour over the data set together, and we're going to refine the targeting. So it'll be ready and well-defined for the end of March easily when we move the drill over there.
Okay, good. Well, look, shareholders can expect more news coming on that shortly. Let's shift gears back to McGarry, which is our third project. We were anticipating to drill that immediately after the existing program on the Knight, but we're going to do some deep penetrating geophysics.
Yes.
Okay, and so that probably, in terms of time frame, has bumped it back to after the Murado.
We're looking to do, the reasoning there for doing a geophysical survey is that there's been a fair amount of drilling done on the end and underground working as well at McGarry. That generated a resource, a modest resource. But what we're thinking is that the real upside at McGarry is going to be along strike, along that Larder Cadillac structure, slightly to the west and also to the southwest of it on a second order, as we call it, or cross-cutting structure, and in what's been historically called the mill zone. And it's become almost axiomatic in exploration, in the exploration world these days, that if we're going to find big deposits in heavily explored areas, we have to do what we call exploring undercover. In other words, we need to start looking for deposits that are not going to crop out on the surface. They might not even make it to the top of bedrock or within 100 meters or so of the surface. We have to use new techniques and methods to look deeper, to identify buried, if you will, mineral deposits. So in order to define high quality drilling targets at McGarry, we're going to do a combined IP and MT survey, IP being induced polarization, MT magnetotellurics, with Quantec Geoscience. We're in the advanced stages of planning. What that does is it will allow us to see with the one technique down several hundreds of meters to look for disseminated sulfide minerals, which should be associated with mineralization in that area. And the MT will allow us to look even deeper for evidence of really deep-seated structures that could be root zones to potential deposits. We think that after we've done that survey, we do the modeling, we're going to likely have some machine learning done on that as well in order to help us generate targets. Then we'll be ready to go in there and drill some modestly deep to deep holes on buried targets, if you will, or deep targets.
Okay, well, look, I couldn't agree more. We talk all the time about being in a mature camp, which we are. There's obviously pros and challenges associated with that. The pros are we're in between and next door to world-class mines such as the Kerr-Addison or the Macassa.
Well, this is something that if we have just a moment here that I'll mention. I mean, the Kirkland Lake to Virginia Town district, we'll call it, along the Larder Cadillac structure, has generated roughly 40 million ounces of gold production, okay? Roughly 1/4 of that, about 11 million ounces, came from the mine you just mentioned, Kerr-Addison, which is kind of a stone's throw, really, a couple thousand to 3,000 meters to the east of McGarry. So we're in a really good neighborhood there. But we have to take the time and use the proper technology and methodology to define the drilling targets before we go in there and spend our money exploring that property. But when you're in the neighborhood of an 11 million ounce mine that finished production in 1996, I believe it was, not that long ago, you're in a good neighborhood.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, and I certainly can attest to, we are busy. You are busy. We've got a lot on our plate here. We're well financed to do it. And so it sounds like we've got 3 drill programs on tap for 2021. So no one wishes you more luck than I. And I'm looking forward to the results. And I appreciate you coming in today and on behalf of Ore Day and on behalf of Orefinders. So thanks, Keith.
Thank you.